Uh-oh, haven't heard from this guy in a while, but Governor DeSantis in Florida, he's in some deep, deep trouble. Some incredible local reporting by the Miami Herald exposing a $35 million scheme diverting money away from the Floridians who should be getting this money. Katie Phang, is a host on the MeidasTouch network. Subscribe to her channel, by the way, did an incredible recap on this. Katie's from Florida. The issue is here, Ron DeSantis in some serious trouble in this $35 million scheme. And I want to put it on your radar. I know with all the craziness going on with Trump's cover-up of child sex traffickings, with all of the fraud that Donald Trump is engaged in, it seems like Ron DeSantis, though, may need to angle more for a pardon for himself right now at the end of this Trump term than perhaps even running for office, which is what his ambitions are. Let me bring in Katie Phang from the MeidasTouch network. Katie, take it away.
Hey folks, Katie Phang here. I wanted to go through some amazing reporting from the Miami Herald. It came out before Christmas. And again, there's been so much going on, and understandably so, about the Epstein files, the, vessel strikes, the war against Venezuela. I mean, there's just so much going on that this probably didn't kind of register on your radar, but it's so egregious and it involves Governor Ron DeSantis that I felt like it was so important to share this information with you. And so I wanted to get into the details. And again, my hat off to the Miami Herald. Local journalism, folks, always support it. Our local journalists are telling us what is happening in our respective backyards. It is invaluable reporting. And I know that I am just preaching to the choir when I say that our local journalists, our papers, our publications, they deserve our support. While we're talking about support, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'm asking you with respect, can you please like and subscribe? You may think that you've subscribed to this channel already, but maybe you haven't. And if you like the content that I am putting out, please let other people know so they can also subscribe to the Katie Phang News channel. So let's get into this reporting. It's critically important, and here we go. And it is Governor Ron DeSantis's administration diverted more than $35 million in taxpayer funds as part of his agenda last year in 2024 to defeat two ballot amendments that he staunchly opposed. I'm going to say some of the key parts again. DeSantis diverted $35 million in taxpayer funds. Taxpayers in Florida, your funds that were earmarked for specific agencies in Florida, for specific services, for specific communities, diverted to fight against two specific ballot initiatives that were on the ballot in November of 2024 that DeSantis didn't like. And wait till you hear what they were, those ballot initiatives. According to the Miami Herald, much of that diverted money, much of that diverted $35 million was intended to assist needy Floridians, including children. Instead, it went to DeSantis cronies, political consultants, lawyers, and thousands of advertisements that helped DeSantis and his ass kissers win at the ballot box. The two ballot amendments were the one that was going to basically put into the Constitution of Florida the right to an abortion. It would have basically gotten rid of the idea that you have a 6-week fetal heartbeat abortion ban here in Florida. It basically would have given Floridians this right. And the other one was to legalize marijuana. Now, here's the thing. In Florida, you'd have to get 60% of the vote. And in both instances, they came really, really close, the people that wanted to have these amendments passed. So, Amendment 3 specifically would have legalized recreational marijuana, and Amendment 4 would have overturned the 6-week fetal heartbeat abortion ban, and both fell just short of the 60% that was needed to pass. So think about this. If our elected officials like DeSantis are supposed to be respecting the will of the voters, and the voters are telling you pretty damn close to 60% that they want to legalize recreational marijuana and they want to provide the constitutional right to an abortion in the state of Florida, shouldn't you be listening to your voters? Shouldn't you be listening to them instead of actively diverting already earmarked taxpayer funds to the tune of $32 million to defeat those amendments? How about not putting your thumb on the scale? In addition, within that 32 million diverted misuse of funds, there's nearly $10 million that was the use of money from a charity called Hope Florida. So in the Hope Florida charity scandal, which is the subject of a grand jury investigation involving who else? The First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis, and the current Attorney General of Florida, James Utmeyer, who was the chief of staff at the time for Ron DeSantis. Nearly $10 million from a Medicaid settlement was steered to a political committee that was controlled by Utmeyer. And there is an allegation that there is the potential of criminal activity that was afoot. Now, here's the thing. DeSantis, remember, in his failed vanity project to run for president, he had depleted funds, and so he didn't have money to be able to combat these amendments, right? So he basically took money that was taxpayer money that was already earmarked to help Floridians to be able to try to do this all-out media blitz, which include like TV ads and radio ads and Facebook and et cetera, right? So check this out. A professor named Kenneth Goodman, professor emeritus at the University of Miami, who for decades directed medical ethics at that school, said that DeSantis' campaign, quote, "This is corruption at the expense of children." Not just children, by the way, but others. So let's talk about what the Miami Herald and the Tampa Bay Times did, because it's pretty impressive. And you know what it is? It's kind of like, it's old school journalism. I mean, I'll say the word old school, but it's really journalism the way that it's supposed to be, right? So the Herald Times, what they did was this. They looked into thousands of pages of emails, vendor receipts, ad records, and state payments. They went into the state of Florida's accounting and budgeting system. It traces the source of every penny in last year's $116.5 billion state budget. Of $36.2 million in taxpayer money tapped by the DeSantis administration, the Herald Times analysis shows that at least $21.2 million moved through an intricate web of financial transactions across 5 state agencies to just a handful of vendors. Now, of course, we as Floridians and you as concerned Americans, you don't really get the full transparency. Why? Because the state refuses to turn over key documents that were requested by the Herald Times as a part of their story. But what is clear is, in order to pay for these campaigns, DeSantis tapped into funds that were otherwise, again, earmarked for Floridians. I'll give you an example. The DCF had $1.1 million taken from its child protection program to place ads to fight against these amendments. That money had originally come from federal grants, and it mostly was supposed to go to organizations that were helping kids that were in foster care or to offer services and counseling to parents so that they didn't lose custody of their children. And you want to know how it was invoiced? You know how it was booked? Ads for, quote, mothers, babies, and children, end quote. But let me be clear. They were ads to make sure that people like you and me didn't have the constitutional right to an abortion in Florida. The DeSantis administration took $4 million from an opioid settlement trust fund and directed it towards these anti-ballot initiative campaigns. That money was won in 2022 from suing drug makers and distributors, and it was supposed to help drug-addicted Floridians. The Florida Department of Health, $970,000 was redirected from its community public health promotion program to campaign ads. Kind of crazy, right? And that $10 million that we just talked about? Yeah, that was money that a Medicaid contractor named Centene, it had donated that to the Hope Florida Foundation as a part of a big legal settlement in September of 2024. And instead, $8.5 million of it ended up in a political committee that was controlled by James Utmeyer. And that political committee was dedicated to defeat Amendment 3, the legalization of recreational marijuana. The Herald Times analysis found that of the $36.2 million in taxpayer dollars spent on last year's campaign, 79% came from funds that were reserved for healthcare. So, Floridians specifically, I'm talking to you. If you think Ron DeSantis or any of these Republicans give a shit about you, you're dead ass wrong. And let me tell you why I'm adding in other Republicans. Because here, in Florida, you have to be able, if you want to be able to check out if money is being used properly, you're supposed to be able to go to the Department of Financial Services, right? And they're the ones that are going to sit there and figure out, hey, is the money being spent appropriately? Is it in compliance with state laws and the rules? Well, the Department of Financial Services at the time was headed up by the state's elected chief financial officer, who was a guy by the name of Jimmy Patronis. But he has since been elected to Congress. So when the Herald Times contacted Patronis to say, man, we're looking into this money, we want to know what's going on, he said, you really need to talk to the current department head, Blaise Ingoglia. Well, Blaise Ingoglia is a former Republican state senator who was appointed by whom? Ron DeSantis to his position at the Department of Financial Services. It's total lackey, back scratching, quid pro quoing going on here. So you're never going to get accountability when you have Republican governor, Republican AG, Republican state senate, and Republican state representatives, right? It's never going to fucking happen, especially in a place like Florida. Now look, there's this great chart that's included in this piece from the Herald, and it breaks down how $36.2 million in taxpayer dollars was spent to defeat last year's Amendments 3 and 4 by the DeSantis administration. And it's a clear chart. And if you look at it, it's 5 freaking recipients. Only 5. Strategic Digital Services, a GOP-aligned campaign firm. The Hope Florida Foundation, a state-created charity. The Florida Pregnancy Care Network, which runs anti-abortion clinics. RS&H, a state engineering contractor, which then sent $150,000 of the almost $4.43 million it got to the Florida Association of Broadcasters. And then almost $500,000 was spent on 4 different law firms having to defend the state of Florida from lawsuits that were brought because of these campaigns. Now, here we go. As I mentioned, the Department of Health, they diverted $2 million from grants and donations to the campaign against marijuana. And the same legal exemption was apparently cited to every time questions were asked about the healthcare agency spending money, right? Because they were circumventing these competitive bidding requirements that you have to do to be able to get these deals, to get these contracts as vendors. And listen to this, right? The legal exemption that they cited to said that the ads provided, quote, health services involving examination, diagnosis, treatment, prevention, medical consultation, or administration, end quote. What a crock of bullshit. What a vague crock of bullshit. DeSantis' Department of Health has cited that legal exemption more than 5,000 times since 2020 to justify paying doctors, vaccines, health screenings, and other services to support DeSantis policies. Go figure. Now, what I wanted to share with you is this. Remember how I mentioned that one of those 5 recipients of money was one of those abortion agencies? Well, let's talk about what happened to them. Okay, so of that $36.2 million, nearly $5 million was sent to a company called Florida Pregnancy Care Network. And the intent was for this network, the Florida Pregnancy Care Network, to run anti-abortion ads to fight back against Amendment 4, which again would have basically given the constitutional right to Floridians to be able to get an abortion, right? So the board of the Florida Pregnancy Care Network refused to run ads that explicitly targeted Amendment 4. Instead, they ran more, quote, neutral ads about that organization's services and about Florida's services to pregnant women and families as they led up to the November 2024 election. Do you want to know what DeSantis did? Because he got pissed. He then proposed stripping the network of funding because they refused to run the ads that explicitly targeted Amendment 4. And don't forget, there were threats made to criminally prosecute TV stations if they didn't stop running ads that were yes on 4, yes on Amendment 4. They were threatened to be criminally prosecuted, and it was so bad that the Department of Health's general counsel resigned because he's like, I can't be complicit in this. I mean, I want you to think about how much money was basically stolen from Floridians, from taxpayers that would have gone to help them in various ways. And yet these Republicans like DeSantis, they do this without batting an eye. And it just goes to show why I've been harping so much here at my channel about paying attention to our local and state races, because you have to care. You have to care about the people that are running for these races, not only just your governor, but your attorney general and your state reps and your state senators. because they are the ones that more immediately impact you on a daily basis. They're the ones that are controlling the potholes that are in your front streets, that are messing up your car. They're the ones that are impacting the services that are being provided to you and your family, your schools, what's being read, what's not being read. I mean, these are the things that are important. And when you hear something like this, that DeSantis didn't like these particular ballot initiatives, and he diverted $36.2 million to defeat them. And what makes me really mad is it worked. It worked because we didn't hit the 60% threshold. So how many people were influenced because of this diverting of money and the skirting of these laws by DeSantis and his lackeys? I mean, talk about putting your thumb on the scale, right? In an unfair and clearly not legal way. Folks, pay attention to the stuff. I'm going to say what I said at the beginning. Support your local journalists. They are tracking down this stuff. They are doing the type of sleuthing that is good investigative journalism. And so my hat off again to the Miami Herald for doing this type of work and for highlighting and exposing this type of corruption, because we all deserve to know the truth.
New Meidas merch. Head to store.MeidasTouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.